Welcome to the GCN Racing News Show. This week, the 2020 Cyclocross World Champions are crowned in Switzerland. There's a coming of age at La Vuelta San Juan. The European season kicks off in Mallorca and it continues down under with the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race. The World Cyclocross Championships in Switzerland culminated yesterday with the men's elite race. The forecast of torrential rain forced the organisers to bring forward the start time, but even by then, the course had turned from a relatively dry and rideable affair into a mudfest. It didn't have much bearing on the outcome though. Mathieu van der Poel started as the big favourite, obviously, and his performance yesterday was arguably his most dominant of the whole season. He led the race from start to finish, his gap to the rest already a minute at the halfway point, and that climbed most of the way to the finish. It marks the third world title in the elite category for the Dutchman, who will finish his cyclocross season now after winning 24 of the 25 races in which he competed and turn his attention to the road and mountain bike and probably anything else he fancies a crack at. So the race was behind for second place, and it was the young Brit Tom Pidcock who won that silver medal. Not only was he the first ever Brit to make the podium of an elite men's world championships, he was also the first to ever break the top 10. And I think Dan Lloyd put it well on Twitter. He said, in an era where Brits seem quite good at bike racing, we can take huge performances for granted, but today's by Pidcock was nothing short of phenomenal. My lad Jude even managed to get a picture with him, which absolutely made his day over there. What it means is that the Belgians were left to fight it out for the third step and bronze medal, and so it was fitting that that was taken by the most consistent rider from start to finish this season, Toon Aerts. Van der Poel's utter dominance though was highlighted by the time gaps. Over 5 minutes separated him from 10th place, and only 22 riders managed to complete the race, the rest being eliminated through the time cut. According to Cyclocross24 on Twitter, that is the first time in history that there was no rider over the age of 30 in the top 10 of the men's elite race, with Conor van Kessel, the oldest, at 28, which makes me feel really good. /old. In the women's race, as expected, it was a case of Dutch dominance. By the first corner, they had 5 riders in the top 6, and we soon had a quartet of orange jerseys clear of the rest of the field. Celine Del Carmen Alvarado, Anne-Marie Worst, Yara Castellijn and Lucinda Brandt. Castellijn dropped back whilst Katie Compton and Evie Richards almost closed the gap, but the trio out front were too strong for everybody else, and it was soon clear that the medals would be decided between them. The final lap was one of the most exciting that you could ever witness, each of them attempting to land a knockout punch. In the end, it was Worst who led out, but Alvarado managed to find the strength to come around her on the way to the line. Cue floods of tears and emotion. The disappointment of losing the World Cup last week, combined with the jubilation of having just become the world champion, was all a bit too much for Alvarado, who was almost inconsolable after the finish line. Personally, I am incredibly pleased for her. I really think she deserved that after the season that she's had in 2019/2020. And let's not forget, it was only 2 weeks ago that she decided she was going to step up to do the elites rather than the under 23 category. A gamble that has paid off in spades. Celine, you are this week's GCN Rider of the Week. Now speaking of the under-23s, it was Marion Norbert-Ribeiro of France who took the women's title there, whilst yet another Dutch rider, Ryan Kemp, won the men's version. We also had the first ever junior women's cyclocross world champs, and a not unexpected winner there. Shirin van Anrooy of the Netherlands has been up there in a number of the big elite races so far this season, and took the rainbow jersey ahead of compatriot Puck Peters. Expect to see those two right up there with the pros next season, especially as Shirin will apparently have the backing of the Telenet Baloise squad, who should be racing for. Now it looks like we might have the new Sven Nys on our hands. His son, Thibaut. He took the gold medal in the junior men's race, crowning what has been a pretty dominant season for him in that category. It's going to be very interesting to see what he achieves in his first year as a senior. This is how the medal table looked at the end of the weekend. The Dutch coming away with at least twice as many medals as any other nation. They must be doing something right over there, mustn't they? In other cyclocross related news, Daan Hackenberg, the team boss of Alvarado, has said that there will be a women's road team this year that not only includes Alvarado, but also Worst and Castellijn. Now that is something I can't wait to see, particularly given the immense success of male cyclocross riders on the road over the past couple of seasons. And we shall head over to the road now with the Vuelta a San Juan in Argentina. Thanks to those of you who joined our daily live coverage or highlights. We had a lot of fun commentating on it with John Bevan and Marty McDonald. The sprint stages were shared out between Rudy Barbier, who took the opening day, and Fernando Gaviria, who won stages 2, 4 and 7. The other sprint stage was won by Zdenek Stybar, who attacked inside the last kilometre on the penultimate day. There were 2 stages though that shaped the general classification. The first of those being the individual time trial on stage 3, and my word, did we have an outstanding performance there. Now lots is expected of Remco Evenepoel, and thus far he's more than delivering. He was utterly dominant at that time trial, putting over 30 seconds into individual pursuit world record holder Filippo Ganna, and over a minute into everybody else. He did almost lose that lead on stage 5 though, getting caught out in some crosswinds. At one point, the gap was almost a minute and a half between the front 2 groups. I said in commentary that it was over for him and that he'd have to learn from the experience. I had to eat a lot of humble pie as he made his way back to the front at the foot of the final climb and finished 5th on a stage won by Flores of Androni Giocattoli. So, first stage race of the year, first 2 wins for Evenepoel. We asked you over on the GCN app whether you thought he could win the Giro d'Italia this year, his first time of trying, and this is what you said. 9% said he'll win because he's that good, whilst the majority of you, 57%, said that he'll get a top 10 on GC and maybe a stage win along the way, which seems like it's more than achievable for him, doesn't it? Now before we continue, we have got a load of racing coming up here on GCN Racing this coming week. Live coverage and highlights of the men's and women's Herald Sun Tours worldwide. That's the race that concludes the season down in Australia. But we've also got the ETIAS, DVV and Super Prestige Cyclocross rounds on Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday respectively. So make sure you tune into them. Right, so we're going to move down to Mallorca now, where we had the traditional back-to-back 4 one-day races to kick off the European season. Matteo Moschetti won the first of those in a bunch sprint. Trek Segafredo really having a brilliant start to the season, aren't they? What I particularly loved though was this video from Eva Marissa of Moschetti giving his trophy and a bidon to a young fan who came to see him after the race. Brilliant stuff. Bora Hansgrohe's Emmanuel Buchmann won the following day after attacking his rivals on a descent. Valverde won the sprint for 2nd place, whilst Buchmann's teammate Mühlberger came in 3rd. Now this infographic from Amati Purali on Twitter shows what went into that win. The German rider averaged over 400 watts for the final 2 main climbs of 7 and 9 minutes respectively, and when you consider that he weighed 59 kilograms at the Tour de France last year, that's a pretty bloomin' impressive power to weight ratio, 6.8 watts per kilogram to be exact. Movistar managed to turn the tables on Bora Hansgrohe the following day into Andrax, with Marc Slier soloing to the victory, whilst the final day was won again by Moschetti. The Italian seems to have stepped things up over the winter because he beat Pascal Ackermann in both of his wins, which is not an easy feat. Meanwhile, the World Tour continued in Australia with the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race. Leanne Lippert of Team Sunweb survived some pretty bad weather to take a solo victory in the women's race, while the sprinters were also foiled in the men's. Dries Devenens out-sprinting Pavel Sivakov to the line to take what was the 750th win for the Deceuninck Quick-Step squad in its various incarnations. And finally, from last week's road racing, we have a new Colombian national champion. Sergio Higuita got away with Ivan Ramirez Sosa towards the end of the race, but with the latter crashing on a right-hander, Higuita was able to solo to the victory. Egan Bernal had to settle for silver, although that was impressive in itself given that he too had crashed very hard earlier on in the race. Danny Martinez took the bronze medal, and it was he who had won the time trial a couple of days previously, making it a great weekend for EF Education First. Interestingly, Nairo Quintana got the better of Bernal to take the silver medal that day in what looked to be a significantly improved time trial position. Next up, it is our alternative race of the week, which this week is the Gravel and Tar Classic over in New Zealand. Admittedly, we are slightly late to the party with this one as it took place just over 1 week ago, but a great event nonetheless, and one that I'd like to draw your attention to. It is a 140-kilometre race, of which roughly 40% is on gravel roads. Add to the mix some very undulating terrain and a healthy dose of wind, and this year's event was tough, to say the least. Both the men's and women's events are 1.2 UCI ranked races, the latter won by Niamh Fisher-Black riding for the New Zealand national team. Whilst the men's race was also dominated by local riders, Hayden McCormick of the Black Spoke taking the win, a full 3 minutes and 23 seconds in front of teammate Luke Mudgway. In other news, Vasil Kirienka has announced his retirement due to ongoing cardiac problems. The Team Ineos rider had to sit out part of the 2019 season, and it appears that the problem was dangerous enough that doctors advised him to stop racing. As Rowan Dennis pointed out, it means that the title of strongest rider in the peloton is now up for grabs. Kiri was renowned for his ability to ride on the front of the peloton seemingly forever, but he also picked up plenty of his own results along the way, including 2 stages of the Giro d'Italia and a World Time Trial Championships. Such was his reputation within the bunch that apparently Groupama FDJ named their team scooter after him, as motor pacing felt very similar behind that to behind Kiri in the bunch. Now, it does appear, though, that Ineos have been quick to replace him. Cameron Worth has been competing in Ironman triathlon since his last World Tour contract, but has now been signed by the team, presumably with an eye to being another workhorse with a huge engine, a job that has become even more important since the UCI reduced team sizes from 9 to 8 at the Grand Tours. Now, amongst Worth's career highlights so far are 2 participations at the Giro d'Italia and a 2nd place overall at the Tour of Qinghai Lake. Hello? My career highlights are almost exactly the same. I can't believe Sir Dave didn't pick up the phone and call me. Maybe he hasn't got my new number or something. Worth made his debut for the team at the Cadel Evans race, after which he ran back to the hotel as it was apparently exactly a half marathon distance. Nutter. Mikel Landa has been back in the wars. He was apparently the victim of a hit-and-run incident on Saturday out training, which left him in hospital. Thankfully, though, no serious harm was done, and he is expected to resume training over the next few days. Doesn't have much luck, that man, though, does he? The UCI have announced the Cyclocross World Cup dates for the 2020-21 season after that big reform. Amongst the new rounds are Dublin, can't wait for that beer tent, and Villars, a ski resort in Switzerland. And there is a good reason for that one. It looks like there's a chance that cyclocross could become a part of the Winter Olympics at some point, and that round will serve as a snowy test event. And finally, the results from our poll last week. 58% of us, including me, don't think that Richie Porte peaked too early for the Tour de France and that it's something else that's holding him back there. Maybe this will be his year. We'll find out in July. Right, that's all for this week's show. We'll be back next week with the Vuelta Valenciana, the Herald Sun Tour, the Saudi Tour, the Étoile de Bessèges, and the latest rounds of the ETS, DVV and Super Prestige races, which, to remind you, we'll be able to catch live here on GCN Racing. I'll see you then. Bye for now.